Welcome to another episode of the Church Solutions Podcast. My name is Phil Thompson.
And I'm Steve Lacy.
Steve Lacy, you are working hard on a bunch of stuff we've got going on for the near future.
Yeah, got some exciting stuff in the works.
All right. Well,
I'm gonna
let's
be.
should we
Oh,
tell people later about that?
yeah,
Maybe.
sure,
All right.
sure. Fun and
Yeah.
exciting stuff.
Yeah. But speaking of fun and exciting
Gonna
stuff,
be eating my own dog food soon here. You know what that means?
no, what does that? Eat your own dog food. What does that mean?
You've never heard that one?
I have never heard
That
that
if
one.
you're, well, I guess it's in the creator, maybe entrepreneur space. So
Oh, yeah.
if you're building or making something, then you've got to eat your own dog food. You're making dog food, you got to eat the dog food to see if it's any good.
All
So
right.
gonna be eating my own dog food with my small group here. So
Have you ever eaten dog food before?
I have not that I can recollect. I've eaten dirt because you get really bored in South Texas hanging with your buddies and go, let's see what that dirt tastes like. So as a little kid.
Okay. All right. Well, I had dog biscuits one time. I tried dog biscuits one time because my neighbor said you should try them. He was my coach. So I tried them. Yeah. Anyhow. So
Uh,
I've discovered something on Zoom here. I know we're going to get to our podcast here in a moment, but I see I set up like a little stopwatch so I can, because one of my complaints about Zoom has been I don't know how long we've been talking unless I look at the clock on the wall here in my office. And so I found, oh, they have timers and this and that. Only took me a few years, and I'm seeing a timer like the stopwatch on the actual video. Are you seeing that?
it's on your video. It's over your video.
Okay. So I wonder if people are going to see that. It looks backwards for me.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh,
Whatever.
well, we'll see.
Nobody.
We're gonna
Yeah. Yeah.
People are
No,
going, oh my gosh, this guy's been going for 10 minutes.
I
No.
know, right? Yeah, we'll see. But I mean, most people listen to this on wherever they get their podcast, but we do have the video version of this here on YouTube. All right. So real quickly, we have a webinar coming up in real soon. It's February 13th. It's 12 noon, and it's called our Equipment Recommendations Webinar. And so we're going to go through pretty much the basic equipment that you would need for streaming video. The webinar is free. It's going to be about 30 minutes long. There'll be a Q&A afterwards, and you can sign up for the webinar by just going to webinar.streamingchurch.tv. Sign up. You can see some of our past webinars. And this webinar, I don't know if it's going to be controversial, but I already know we have some disagreements on certain equipment, right?
Oh, you mean between us
Yeah,
or
between
just
you and me and
out in,
probably Mike. I haven't really talked to Mike
I don't
about
know,
it,
we'll
but I'm sure
see.
Mike
I
has
guess
an
everybody
opinion.
has opinions.
Yeah.
So this
Opinions are
is,
like, whatever. So everybody has one. So their opinions are like people that have heads, right? And everybody has a head, right? So this is my G-rated version of that. But I think so. We'll probably have some differences of opinion, probably particularly on cameras. I already know you're leaning towards a different camera.
anyway, well,
Yeah.
that'll be good.
Let's move on.
People can decide.
February 13th.
Yes.
Webinar.streamingchurch.tv. One more time. Webinar.streamingchurch.tv. Sign up now. All right. Today is episode number 418, and we're going to talk about why churches don't need ultra high bit rate streaming.
Yes.
Sound good to you?
Yeah. So, all the popular things are like, I'm a YouTube TV subscriber for my TV. I dropped our cable a while back, and they occasionally will push the 4K, or I can increase my monthly payment and move over to the 4K. And so, what's that all about? And shouldn't churches adopt the 4K if they can? And that's kind of what we're going to go through. You had written a very good blog article on this topic at blog.streamingchurch.tv.
That's right. Blog.streamingchurch.tv. You can find it if you're keeping score at home. So let's first of all define what bitrate is. And I don't know if you're probably going to disagree with this, although you haven't said anything about it. So I wrote in the blog, when it comes to bitrate, think of bitrate as the data highway of your video stream. So the higher the bit rate, the wider the lanes and the more information, like the pixels, the colors, the movements, they can flow through everything per second, right? And
Yes.
so in many cases, that translates to sharper images, maybe smoother motion, hopefully overall better visual quality. So of course, the big question is great. So I should stream at a high bit rate as possible. Why shouldn't people do that, Steve Lacy?
Because there's viewers on the other end that are viewing that video. So, and they may run into problems, even though if you're streaming it at a very high bit rate, they may not have the ability to consume that high bit rate on their end.
Yeah. I went on to say, and I don't know how good this analogy is, but I went on to say it's kind of like a monster truck barreling down the road, and it demands more space, and it could potentially cause some traffic jams, which is my analogy for buffering and freezing. And as you just said, most viewers, especially some in rural areas, don't really have lightning fast internet. So streaming at a bit rate that exceeds their bandwidth will lead to some frustrating
Yeah,
pauses and
and
choppiness and all that.
the other thing to consider is, for my 4K on my YouTube TV, I've got a gigantic TV on the wall, and it might make a difference, especially if I had better eyesight. But well, I do have 20/20 eyesight,
Yeah,
so
you do.
my
Yeah.
last check, yes, so, but I may notice it on a big screen. If I'm watching on my computer, I'm not going to notice it. If I'm watching on my phone, I'm definitely not going to notice it. So it's going to make no difference at all. And, if I'm projecting in a theater with a gigantic screen, yeah, I may notice the difference. But your audience is not in a theater. Your audience is, some may be on TV. But I think you'll find that even the ability to discern the difference is almost never worth the headache, because what you're doing is you're introducing, you're basically taking up all your margin that you have on your freeway, on your internet connection. And if you're riding on the very bitter edge, so the chances for problems are greatly exaggerated, both on your side being able to continue to send a stream at that high bit rate, and once you have a failure there, everyone has a problem. So if you can't get the stream out, everyone viewing it has a problem. If you are able to get it out, then those that might not have that connection are going to have a problem, while others will, that do have the connection, might not. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's just go ahead.
Well, yeah, and now there are some workarounds to that, which we'll get into in a moment. But yeah, as you're saying, here's some of the problems that could happen if you're streaming at a really high bit rate. I mean, you can get buffering. There's going to be interaction in your video. You're going to get freezing and stuff that's going to happen for many people out there. And some people, as you just said, they don't have accessibility to high-speed internet, and so they're going to have some issues there. And then it can be not all devices are created equal, right? And so older computers, some of the older stuff out there may have a problem handling some of this stuff. And then it could also be more expensive for you depending on your platform, and depending on the service that you use, and even like the content delivery network that you use. I mean, we don't charge for bitrate. In case anybody is new to us, we're a streaming company, streamingchurch.tv, but we don't charge people for bandwidth usage unless you're like really a huge. There's some exceptions there, but yeah. So there can be problems that add up, and but anyhow, there are some other factors to consider, though.
Yeah. The other thing that makes churches unique from say my YouTube TV. I may watch, Formula One races on YouTube TV. So the picture is, I've got a race car going by at 200 miles an hour. And so the video content is dramatically changing. So I'm going to want, a high frame rate, and there's, constant motion. And what that translates to is just a high degree of encoding. They've got to encode all of that movement. With a church service, it's typically speakers or worship leaders that are, for at least half of the video shot, it's not moving. The people may be moving a little bit, but the background's not. So that reduces the load on your bandwidth and on your encoder. And I say all this to point out that, I watched my home church this weekend on we have a big TV in our family room. And I was just looking at it, I was like, wow, this looks really, really good. This looks really crisp. And it does, and they don't stream at a real high bit rate. They would be considered probably, streaming at a very low bit rate, but it looks great even on a 80-inch TV because it doesn't have to encode much. It'll encode the background that, we've got several cameras and they're switching all the time, but for the majority of the time, the background is fairly static. So it, encodes it for a half a second and then it doesn't have to encode it anymore. Whereas, my Formula One race, it's encoding every pixel of the frame constantly.
Yeah. And of course, we've talked about this before, but if if you're doing something like it, your frames per second needs to go up on your encoder. But generally, we usually recommend around 29 to 30 frames per second.
Yes,
there's your live encoder, because for that very reason, people aren't now. Look, if you're part of a Pentecostal church and there is a lot of running around, hey, I've been in those services before. I mean, I'm not mocking it. I'm just saying sometimes there's some running around on the platform and the stage. Then I don't know. Maybe you might want to adjust that,
but even then, unless the camera's moving a lot, because then if you have the camera swinging around a lot, then that's a big load on your encoding and on your bandwidth. You'll see, you can watch this on your encoder where, it shows you what it's sending. And as soon as you start shifting the camera around, it's going to really, it has to do a lot more work and push a lot more data.
Right. So yeah, it's good information. So you mentioned your church, how good the video looks on your big screen TV. Do you happen to know what the resolution they're streaming at, what bit rate that is?
What bitrate? I think I could be wrong. I may go look it up, but it may be right around like 2 meg.
Yeah.
So that's
it
may be as low as 1.5. I don't know.
Are they doing 720p or 1080p?
I think they're doing 1080.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong either. But either way, it looks. I would be challenged to put up 2 TVs next to each other, and one is streaming at 8 megapixels.
Yeah, I think it's true that if you, unless you have big screen TVs, you don't need to do really something crazy. I do want to say this, though, that there's information out there on the internet that says, like, if you stream 1080p, you should stream at 6,000 kilobytes per second or 8,000 kilobytes per second. And I noticed even on some of the presets, like on some of the encoders like Wirecast and vMix, they definitely are, the default, I guess, for 1080p is really very high as far as a video bit rate, which we're saying you don't need to do.
Not for church content. Yeah. If I've got a camera on the shoulder of somebody at one of my kids' Frisbee tournaments and they're live streaming, and if I don't have a higher bit rate and I can't support it, it might, the video I might notice it. But for a church service, I don't think it's needed.
Yeah, I would say that's true. I would agree with that. So people need to keep that in mind. And the reason I wrote this blog and the reason we're even talking about this is I get this from time to time from some of our customers, especially newer customers. It's like, well, yeah, I'm getting buffering. I mean, freezing it. Must be you guys. Now, there are some workarounds to that. If you really want to stream at a high video bit rate and you actually have plenty of upload speed at your location, there's a couple things you can do. One of them is called ABR. and I'll go ahead and in my Steve Lacy mode here. Uh, Tell us what ABR is,
I'm trying to
Steve. You,
remember
you
what.
you do know what
all,
ABR is, right? You do
I'm
remember
just I all this is kind of like, what's your cousin's
it.
dog's name? I know I call it every day. Uh,
Adaptive bit rate.
Adaptive bitrate. Yes.
Yeah,
Now it just came back to me. I
I,
was like, what is
I,
that?
I do that. I want to do that to you because you do that to me all the time. Maybe not on a podcast, but you'll do that. Like, you know why we do this, right? It's like, well, yeah, we did it 10 years ago and I can't remember. But yeah, adaptive
Yes.
bit rate. So tell us what, as a
So
possibility, adaptive bit rate could be
yeah.
used.
So adaptive bitrate will sense the connection speed of the viewer and adjust the video to accordingly. So,
So,
yeah. So there's, but you'll need to send out multiple streams from your location to enable the adaptive bitrate, at least with our service. So,
yeah. So you send, with our service, you could send 3 streams. Or you could do 2, but you could send 3. I want a really high quality stream. So
yeah,
if you're one of these people that insist, no, I want to stream at 8,000 kilobytes per second. So you could do that if you have plenty of internet. And then you could also stream at a lower bit rate. Again, you have to have a live encoder that allows you to send multiple streams. So you
yeah,
could do a medium stream at, I don't know, 3,000 kilobytes per second.
yeah.
And then a low one, you could do a low one. So you'd be sending 3 streams,
Right.
but you also have to add all those up. So if you're sending 8, and then 3, that's 11, and then, I don't know, 1, that's 12, right? Did I add it up right? So you got
Yes.
to have
And
enough
so,
upload speed to
so then you
cover
would
that.
need at least 24
Yeah, I
uploads
always I always
to
say
add some more.
more. Yeah, you
Yeah.
double what you send. I like to say triple, but that may be a little unreasonable. But
Yeah.
so
So,
you need to have enough ceiling.
yeah. And another, I mean, if you get nothing else out of this, that one free check is just lowering your frame rate from 60 to 30. That will cut the amount of data that's going out in half.
Yeah.
So, and for a church service, that's a major saving. So if you're trying to stream at 60 frames per second, for the gymnastics meet, yeah, that might be good. But for the church service where you're walking around slow, that'll save you half of the, and that'll save it on the consumption side too. So anyway,
Yeah.
moving on. So what you kind of put in the article was there's a Goldilocks zone. So there's
Yes.
a
Yeah.
space. What is that space? Where's the
It-
Goldilocks zone?
so it's not too hot, not too cold. It's just right. So it's the sweet spot. So it's the ideal bit rate between your quality and your accessibility. So again, we're trying to say here today, if you haven't got anything else out of this so far, there's no one size fits all, right? And so it all depends on the viewers, your internet speeds, your upload speeds, the devices that your viewers use, and your desired video quality. So a good starting point. Go ahead,
I
jump in
was,
here.
and there's, you can, at least with our service, you can know what those devices are. So you can just
Yes.
go on and it'll show a report. And I don't know if competitors, they may have the same kind of thing.
Right.
But the free services, you're not going to know. But anyway, it's going to show, and you'll be surprised. I think a lot of people say, "Well, I encode and do everything on my computer," and so I'm just assuming everybody's either watching on their computer or their TV. But the amount of people on mobile is typically very high, 50% and above. Some churches it'll be maybe 80% of their audience is on mobile, which means the majority of those guys are on a data service, from their cell phone. So there's no way that if you send out, an 8 megabit per second stream, that they're not going to have problems. And it's all just wasted, right? So it's kind of all built into finding this Goldilocks zone, what's going to be right for you. You don't want it too slow so that you see some, video degradation, but you don't want it too high that you'll see failures. I consider failures as buffering, skipping, audio, video out of sync, things like that.
Right. And by the way, I sometimes I tend to go with use 2 to 3 kilobytes per second, 2 to 3,000 kilobytes per second, but I think you use megabytes per second. So 1,000 kilobytes per second is 1 meg.
Yes.
Those of you keeping score at home. So two to
Yes.
three megabytes per second is generally what we recommend, to our people, as long as they have adequate internet and that. So 2 to 3,000 kilobytes per second or
Yeah.
2 to 3 megabytes per second. They're interchangeable. And we say that for 1080p, but you could do 720p. A lot of people do 720p and everybody's happy about that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but that's just us. So and it's the Goldilocks zone. It's one size does not fit all. You need to do a little research and find out what's going on. And also, as we continue to talk, remember it's not just about the tech. It's about a good streaming experience for people. It's is your audio good? Do you have decent microphones where the audio is clean and crisp? Because as I'll beat this drum again, speaking of audio, people, if they can't understand your video, if it's garbled, if the audio is really bad, if the audio is real bad and people are far away, or people are really over driving like that, nobody's going to stick around for that. Okay, you could have the best video in the world,
Yeah.
but if your video is okay, good, and you have good audio, really good audio, and then you're going to keep your people. They're going to keep watching.
Yeah. And people don't tend to try to tweak their audio settings to improve their audio. Typically, all of your audio improvement is going to be through equipment and just good practices, I think. So
Yeah, monitoring your audio on your stream,
yeah,
because your
because the
house monitor is going to be different than what's on the internet.
yeah, because your audio is going to be streaming at a really low bit rate. I mean, if your audio is going to go out at 96 or 128. And my son would be maybe considered an audiophile, so they really get into the quality of, basically it's for music, and people do some weird stuff with that, but you don't need it. So especially for a church service.
Yeah, 128 kilobytes per second is generally what we recommend. I mean, you can go
Yes.
higher, but again, is there a big difference? It just depends on what you're doing too,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but as you said, for a church service, that's pretty typical. Okay, all right. So where are we going here? We're just about out of time here. I think
Yeah. The big trap is to fall into the hype, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
4K, I can get 4K. We need to stream in 4K. And, people hear about it and don't really know what it is and what the costs and stuff, and just don't fall into it. I mean,
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
of you're going to, without any failures in your stream, is going to be the best experience for people.
Absolutely. And as I have in the blog here, blog.streamingchurch.tv, I'll shamelessly plug it again. If you really are concerned about some of this stuff, really make sure you invest in some decent quality software and hardware. A reliable encoder will go a long, long ways. A stable internet will go a long, long ways. And so you can do a lot with stuff that's decent equipment. Speaking of equipment, we're going to have an equipment recommendations webinar, which I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, and it's going to be February 13th. And so sign up at webinar.streamingchurch.tv, and we'll talk about some of the equipment there.
All
And
right.
you can do it. Reserve your seat now. Sign up and reserve your seat now at webinar.streamingchurch.tv. Okay, so I think we're out of time here. I think this covers it. We always want feedback. Look, if you disagree with us, I don't know why you would, but I'm being kind of facetious here. But we'd love to get your feedback on all this stuff. I mean, we've been doing this for years, but hey, we're open to other feedback on things and different ideas and opinions. So just reach out to us, streamingchurch.tv. You can chat with us anytime. We may not always be there in the evenings, but you can still leave a message in the chat box. Just go to streamingchurch.tv and there's a chat box in the bottom right. And we'll be happy to talk with you and address you. And if you have, look, if you, we'll be glad to do some free consultation, even if you don't use us. We'll be glad to talk to you about what you got going on and maybe help troubleshoot some things, give you some clues on how to fix some problems. So, check us out. Okay, we're good. Thank you, Mr. Steve Lacy.
Glad to be here.
And folks, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We really do appreciate it. Be sure and subscribe to the Streaming Church. Be sure and subscribe to the Church Solutions podcast. You can always go to streamingchurch.tv and subscribe to our newsletter. But the Church Solutions podcast is available anywhere that you get your podcast. So check it out. Give us a rating if you can, and we would appreciate it. So, for everybody here at our wonderful company, please take care of yourselves and each other, and we will catch you again next time on another episode of the Church Solutions Podcast. My name is Phil Thompson.